Today we have with us Amruda Nair, Director of Araya Hotels and Resorts, a third generation hotelier. Amruda has founded Araya Hotels and Resorts in 2018, which is a design forward, upscale, technology led, wellness oriented brand. Apart from entrepreneurship, Amruda serves on multiple boards and non-profit organizations such as the Sahachari Foundation and Apne Aap Women's Collective. Naveen Honagundi, Managing Director at K Capital, has over 10 years of experience in investing in early stage companies. Prior to joining K, Naveen was with Reliance Venture Asset Management and serving on the board of directors of Tesosol Services, Dharma Innovations, and also as a board observer on Reverse Logistics, Suvidha InfoServe, and Wellspring owned entities. Next panelist, Raghav Joshi, is the co founder and CEO and India Business Unit Head of Rebel Foods, which was formerly known as Passos. Rahul has worn many hats, graduating as an engineer, pursuing his PGDM at IIM Indore, working with JP Morgan and Deloitte before Rebel Foods happened. Our next panelist, Sahil Jatana, is a co-founder at Swami, a progressive drinks company. Swami currently offers all natural alternative beverages featuring the country's finest tonic waters and ginger ale. Before the inception of Swami, Sahil worked at Channel V, NDTV Imagine, Netcore Solutions, and even founded his own digital agency, Caffeinated Solutions. And bringing all these panelists together and taking the conversation forward, our moderator for this discussion is Rajat Mahajan, a partner at Deloitte India. With over 19 years of consulting and industry experience, Rajat has led multiple large scale transformation programs and worked across a cross section of Indian and global companies across various sectors such as retail, consumer products, hospitality, and has helped in delivering significant improvement such as revenue enhancement, cost reduction for a large hotel chain in India, and also formulating a blockchain strategy for tourism and much, much more. I think without taking more time, I'd hand over to Rajat and the panelists. So over to you to take this conversation ahead.
Thank you, Shivangi. And I hope I am audible.
Yes,
Awesome. You are, Rajat. We can hear
Thank you. So, first of all, great inputs, Rahul. It's always a pleasure to read and listen to whatever you say. I just wanted to, this is a pretty esteemed panel, but I just wanted to set some couple of things, before we jump right in. I'm hoping it to be a very interesting panel because I think on the other hand, we have a lot of investors, restaurateurs, and also people who are interested in this industry, per se. So, we all know that we went through a significant, turmoil in the Horeca, and Horeca was one of the industries that got hit significantly. And at some point in time, it was estimated that nearly 40 to 45% restaurants may go out of business due to obviously the high overheads that you said, Rahul, increase high rentals, fixed and, fixed costs, and obviously with minimal or decreased footfalls. But however, as per the recent study that we had done, so Deloitte does a very extensive study, or rather we started doing the study in March last year. And the latest edition actually came out 2 weeks back. And I will request Shivangi to share with everybody. It's a free for all. 13 different countries were studied, and including India, a significant number of population. And the beauty is that Indians were, the anxiety level within Indians were very high, but at the same time, they were the most enterprising compared to most other countries. What does that mean? So even today, some of the recent numbers that have come out is nearly close to 47, 48% are still, feel that they are safe to fly. 47, 48% are, feeling safe while staying in a hotel, etc., and vice versa. People have been experimenting. And in the last few months, obviously, we've seen a booming opportunity for cloud kitchens, right? The contribution earlier, and this is expected to be close to $1 billion or more than $1 billion by 2023 by certain estimates. And the contribution estimated to be nearly 20% of the food delivery market, which is huge, right? Now, these percentages, these new, things, technology folks getting into it, pretty much an interesting play. And we know and obviously the local food aggregator platforms, right? They have emerged as, I would say, the saviors for the traditional brick and mortar restaurant chains, etc. And at the end of the day, it's like a balancing that is happening between the brick and mortar as well as the cloud kitchens. And we will see how this trends evolve, while it is on subscription commerce or kitchen automation, direct to consumer brands, contactless dining. There are many such things which are evolving. So let me pause here, and while Shivangi has done all the introductions, but maybe I'd like to keep it interactive to all my panel members. So there'll be certain questions as we are, as you all must be expecting. But let's we'll try and keep it more specific and focused here. And Shivangi, I leave it to you to moderate in case there are any questions.
Sure, Rajat. I think we also have Rahul here who might just stay on and jump in if he feels like. So just wanted to give you a heads
awesome.
up. Yeah.
That's a pleasure. Fantastic. So Amrita, how do I mean, you're a global entrepreneur, right? I mean, Middle East, India, Southeast Asia. You've been all over. You can say literally the globe. Now, my first question is to you, like, which future trend do you think will play sooner than expected? Okay, given that you have experienced both the brick and mortar side as well as now you're trying to evolve yourself as an online player as well. So, what are your experiences, and what do you think are the trends that will shape the future of this industry?
So, Rajat, my sense is that a lot of the trends that we're seeing were already in play. And what the pandemic really has done is accelerated them. So whether it's the hospitality space or the restaurant space, whether it's sustainability, conscious consumption, experience-oriented dining or stays, hyper personalization, all of these things we've been talking about for quite a few years now. So I think what the pandemic forced us to do was react faster, perhaps, and maybe leverage technology to be able to address those needs in a more efficient manner. Even contactless interactions, right? I mean, we've been talking about contactless, keyless, uh, uh, room entry. We've been talking about a lot of these QR codes in restaurants. All these things have been around for a while. It's just that we've been forced to now adopt them in a much faster pace.
Sorry, somebody put me on mute. But I think what you're saying is very interesting, right? So you're saying that it's just been pulled forward. It was right there in front of our faces, looking at us, staring at us, but probably we found an excuse to get over there.
It's a forced adoption.
Yeah, forced adoption. That's interesting. Now, one more question, Amrita, just, what do you think brick and mortar, right? While it was there in front of us, but do you think brick and mortar eventually will get disrupted or will come out as a disruptor given the new onslaught of technology giants?
The only brick and mortar restaurant space that's standalone that I have is in Malta. And but it's a rather large space. It's a 100-cover restaurant in the capital of Valletta. And what it's forced us to do is, completely cater to a new audience. So, typically on the island, you get 2.5 million international tourists and you only have 300,000 Maltese. Now, ever since the island's been cut off, we have no choice but to cater to this whole new local audience that we never had to really focus on previously. And what's interesting is that the reason they've decided to come to us as an Indian restaurant is because they are looking for a premium experience. So while you can have sort of a curry house meal at 10 euros a pop, they're choosing to come to you because they think it's a brand that is a little bit more premium and will therefore offer them the safety and assurances. So while we've remained brick and mortar, what we're really doing is catering one to a new audience, and we're perhaps leveraging technology a little bit more in the sense from our booking systems and trying to go direct to cater to that new audience. And obviously, the online business has been impacted, and I think that's here to stay, because even while when the economy came back and things opened up again, we saw that the online business that we had sustained itself. So it's not that it was replaced by in-house dining.
Got it. Now, if I can move, let me bring bring Raghav into the discussion. So Raghav, on one hand, there are brands, right? And one of the researchers that showed us as well that in such a situation that we're going through right now, people would tend to trust the brands that have been there in existence, right? Established over years of, you can say, presence and dealing with customers. How do you think cloud kitchens entry into this industry, right? Will it, obviously you've gained a significant share, but do you think that the base itself has shifted or it may go back?
Right. I think that's absolutely correct. Brands which have built their presence over years and decades, they definitely will always have a better top of the mind recall for customers. If somebody wants to order pizza, Domino's and Pizza Hut will always be the first ones to come to mind because that's what people have been seeing for the last 20, 25 years. For us, that is, a challenge and as well as an opportunity. We think that in food people do want variety. People obviously want consistency when they order. They want high quality, but people always also want to seek newer and better options. So that provides us, we believe, provides us an opportunity in each of the categories. And working in a cloud kitchen model, and especially a multi-brand cloud kitchen model, allows us to focus on multiple customer missions at a time. Uh, Pizza might be one opportunity, but and that might be a dinner time opportunity or a lunchtime weekend opportunity. But apart from that, there are multiple other opportunities such as breakfast, in which a person might not be wanting to order pizza. So can we have some other breakfast options that we can build in the same kitchen? That is where the power of a cloud kitchen comes from. And for the snacks mission again, can we have something? So while I agree that the established players will always have, and as long as the offering is better in a competitive environment, that will always win, irrespective of how established a brand is. But I think a model like cloud kitchens does provide a low cost starting base for us and for other home chefs, restaurateurs out there to at least start offering in their specific localities, get the product market fit right, and then see how to scale that up. I think that's really the key. But no doubt about it that the established brands will always have an edge. Also, with higher volumes in this industry, the economies of scale definitely kick in. So higher volumes allow you to offer a more competitive offering to customers. So that is something which I think is true for many other industries. So yeah, I mean, there is it's probably like many other industries which are getting disrupted, that you start with lower margins, you try to build a great offering for the customer, and that is where you start gaining market share, and eventually those economies of scale start kicking in, and you get you start making larger margins as well.
Okay, interesting. So, on the overall cloud journey, you just did touch upon the scale aspect, etc. But if I have to just extend that discussion, right? I mean, scale and quality, right? I mean, when you're a restaurant, like Amrita said, 100-seater, right? When you're a brand, you're dealing with some select set of customers, at your own discretion. Okay, we used to see all those boards outside that we have the right to allow people, etc. So that but at the end, that was personalized, right? That was very focused. Now, in such a case, what happens to experience on one hand? And second is, how do you tackle the quality aspects? Because see, scale is achieving scale obviously is not easy, and you've got the right tech in place, right? Onboarding people now with the help of various examples in e-commerce market, we have seen that onboarding people have now learned in India over the last 5 years.
Right.
But how do you manage the quality? How do you continue to deliver superior experience, right? Just
Yep.
if you can touch upon these two aspects, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. I think that's really the key in this industry. I think a lot of restaurants start and they are able to do well in one location, but the moment they want to do the same thing in 5 or 10 or 50 locations, that's when the experience, there's a risk of the experience getting diluted, the consistency, suffering. And that's what our focus also is, that as we scale any brand across a network of 300 plus kitchens, we have to make sure that the quality, the consistency, the experience is intact. And I mean, over the years, we've learned that it has to be really done the hard way. It starts with the kitchen team being led by a very motivated, store manager. It might sound, things might sound very obvious, but it really is, the key is executing it well. So you have to make sure that the team is led by somebody who's absolutely motivated, can lead the team, can build a team of trained, motivated individuals. Their goals are aligned to the company's goals. They have the processes which are easy to follow. For example, let me take an example of a night cleaning checklist. We know that every kitchen should be cleaned in the night, but is the person motivated to do that every single night? Is the person actually motivated to remove every single equipment and clean every corner, which ensures that there is no pest infestation in the kitchen? So it goes down to getting to those minute details, putting them in place so that the team can quickly follow them like a checklist, and then using technology as much as possible. So are you doing it on paper, or are you digitizing it in some way? And then also using technology to audit. So we audit our kitchens at a very high frequency through camera audits, physical audits, and through an external agency audits as well. So I think really execution at a scale boils down to having a strong team in place, putting the processes, digitizing them as much as possible, and having very strong auditing mechanism in place. That's really the key, so that we can maintain quality at scale.
I like that, quality at scale. So interesting. I mean, you made it sound pretty simple, but I'm sure it's a pretty difficult and a very arduous job to get it done. Now, Naveen, if I have to get you in, right? I mean, so as a as an investor, right? How do you think about all these things when you look at such startups, such cloud kitchens emerging? And has that shifted your focus as an investor, or rather not focus, but as a view as an investor on the traditional segments in terms of hotels or restaurants, etc.? So how do you evaluate both these opportunities, or one actually scores above the other?
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. I think definitely, agree with some of the co-panelists when Amruta said or talked about, things getting accelerated given the pandemic, and when Raghav also talked about, the standardization we looked at. But I mean, as we stand, we are extremely excited by where the market is, right? I think Indian market broadly is still nascent, in my opinion. If you look at, US, the online food delivery market size would be roughly 72 billion, and the penetration would be 9.5%. China gets even bigger with market size of 95 billion and penetration of 13%. India is still early in that stages, right, with the market size of 3 billion and the penetration of 4%. Even if you look at Meituan, which is China's largest company, that's 230 billion, right? And the online food ordering market is 27 times. So I'm saying even if you adjust for GDP with some of the countries, you clearly see a clear headroom of growth of 5 to 6x, in the next 5 years, right? So I think we are fairly excited by the cloud kitchen sort of model concept. I think key is definitely standardization, right? And something that Raghav talked about, wherein it is sort of an airline industry, right, in a certain way, wherein however good your backend is, which of course has to be good, right? But the key is, the person who's really carrying your trolley, the person who gives you boarding pass, right? So I think that's fairly equitable, even here, right? So how does the person, who's giving you the pizza, how's the cleaner motivated enough to see that the burger he's crafting or the pizza he's making is eventually resulting in a better outcome for him, even from a monetary perspective. I think once that gets drilled down to the last person, it's eventually a service industry, right? And then that's when the flywheel kicks in and network effect plays in for things to become large in this space.
Thanks, Naveen. That's a very interesting perspective. How about you? Any points on the, how do you look at the unit economics here, right? I mean, what's the learning from the traditional e-commerce, right? Moving away from the big GMVs that we used to speak about and the valuations based on that. And some people said those valuations probably were in the cloud at that time. Now we have to value a cloud in real terms. So what are the unit economics that you look at right now?
So very interestingly, all these questions were definitely part of pre-pandemic or post-pandemic. If you would have asked me to take a guess, I would have thought this would have gotten even worse. But this has even bettered, right? This has bettered significantly, and I'll give you some examples, right? For example, while the number of orders may have come down, the AOV has increased significantly, right? Because even if you see for where people used to order for themselves, right? Now they've been ordering for families, right? Because it is work from home. So the AOV has increased significantly. That has helped in unit economics. Second, even the change that people wanted, right? I mean, then what they eat usually, which is let's say stuff like pizzas and biryanis were really fast moving, right? And this goes very well along with a family, from a higher AOV perspective and so on. Returns, of course, decrease significantly. Some interesting points is, delivery costs in tier 2 and tier 3 cities are 50% that of, tier 1 cities. I think unit economics are definitely stabilizing. AOVs is somewhere mid 200s, which is closer to, let's say, a China benchmark of, close to $6. Delivery fulfillment cost is somewhere stabilizing in the mid 30s. I think take rates are still in the mid-teens, need some time to stabilize. But if you ask me, some of these companies, the larger companies, the unicorns, are turning profitable much sooner than we expect. I wouldn't be surprised even if they'll be EBITDA positive in the next year, FY22.
Wow, that's a very positive outlook, and to all the probably startups out there, there's something to cheer about. Now let me switch gears. I don't know, what should I call you, Sahil? I mean, is it like new kid on the block, or but very interesting brand you've come up with. It was built around a ritual in the pre-pandemic era, right? Bartenders mixing unbelievable drinks. It just came to a grinding halt. How did you switch gears as such a young brand, right? If you can throw some light, and how did you combine the power of technology online with the consumers? So
thanks, Rajat. Thank you. Thank you. I think I'll take on from what Amruta said in her opening remarks about what the trends are. I think the trends for us were moving towards retail primarily because starting just before the pandemic, around March of last year, we had about 70 to 80% of our business coming from HoReCa, and suddenly HoReCa shut down, right? What do you do? There was obviously panic in brands like ours who were dependent primarily on HoReCa as a part of our sales channel, majority of our sales channel. Having said that, we were working very hard on retail. The plan to go to retail or switch the model to a 70% retail and a 20% HoReCa was planned for the next 3 years per se. Pandemic made us do it in 7 months, right? I think that is the kind of agility a lot of brands come with these days. There are plans that can be fast tracked. You're not always relying on the traditional medium, so to say, right? Having said that, D2C is the next segment that everybody's been talking about, and everybody wants to be a D2C brand because barrier to entry is far easy. You don't need brick and mortar. You don't need any other. You're not relying on anybody else. It's just primarily about performance marketing, getting people to know about your brand, getting them excited enough, and getting into their house, right? For a brand like ours, that comes at its own set of challenges, right? Logistics are still not as friendly as they would be for some brands, especially because we are in glass bottles. Transportation takes a hit. We're also trying to be sustainable. We are trying to move away from bubble wrap, plastic tapes. All those kind of things are also playing on our regular operations to figure out how can we be more appealing to a customer, right? It's not just about the product. It's all about, like you said, it's about the experience, right? I unfortunately can't send a bartender to your house to make a drink for you, right? But can I include a drinking guide that can help you source the coolest or the easiest ingredients in your fridge that can help you make a great cocktail, right? Uh, this whole house, over the last 2 months, and or rather since unlock one kind of happened, that while we were waiting for Horeca to kind of open up and restaurants were taking a call depending with what the government is doing and stuff like that, people were starting to go to each other's house. House parties were coming back online, and they were getting back to what they were at the pre-pandemic level. That's why at that point in time we kind of decided, how can we be a part of that house party, right? I want to be a part of that house party. So we've created something called as a BYOB box. Like it's a gift pack, comes with 12 mixers, has space for putting a bottle of alcohol in it. It's like a briefcase, pick it up, go to a party, have a blast, right? And those 12 mixers will primarily be enough for that one bottle of alcohol. So it's a party box, right? You can gift it to someone, you can take it to somebody's place. So those are some of the little things that we try to build in terms of being still a part of your drinking ritual. And like I said, even though D2C is a big thing, we still rely a lot on retail, because that habit of drinking or enjoying your drink cannot be relying on when my mixers will get delivered to me, right? Can I call my local kirana shop and get that mixer delivered to me in the next hour or so that I'm ready to party at any given time? With the kind of effort that we built in on growing our retail channel slowly and steadily over the whole of 2019 and early part of 2020, I think that's kind of paid off in terms of helping us get back on track in about 3 months' time from when the unlock kind of happened. So yeah, I mean that's essentially it. We've also worked on a lot of collaboration with people to be on top of the mind recall from mixer perspective. We also launched a couple of new beverages during this time, and I mean 4 of them actually. So launching a new product during a pandemic is a challenge. Any time is a challenge itself, but during the pandemic, I think is a bold step from that perspective. But we've seen some great response come towards it.
No, very interesting. I must say, right, I mean, the Indian consumer, right, I mean, nearly, as I had mentioned earlier in the opening remarks, that while 47 or 45%, close to 50%, that was between the age group of 18 to 35. As we surveyed, older people, especially people beyond 50, they are even more enterprising in India, which was like a revelation, right? And it has created a whole new segment in itself, which was kind of hidden somewhere and probably, was always taking a backseat. Now,
Sorry,
Amrita,
on a lighter note, you can't keep your parents locked in during lockdown. It's very difficult. It's the other way around. Like earlier, they were fighting with you to stay at home. Now you have to fight with them for them to stay at home.
So very interesting. From a lighter note to a higher note, Amrita, you're apart from your you can say background of entrepreneur, you also you're an investor apart from being a hotelier, restaurateur, etc. So as an investor, right, when you as I think Sahil was also alluding to, that customer is not easy to please. So how do you find the right things that this company has got the right hooks for the customer, and hence I will go and invest? Or it's that comes, or probably the numbers, economics and all those things comes first? So just, I mean, what's your perspective from an investor standpoint?
At least for me, the last investment was the last round with Swami, and I think for me, what resonated was more on a principle basis. It was an interesting brand. They were, they had this whole ready to drink concept. The non-alcoholic space was interesting. To me, I loved the whole Seedlip story, and so it was a space that I was interested in. And I thought these guys were just more agile and brought it forward in a sexier way. So I think they just hit all those boxes. So I think it was more in terms of the basic principle of things and the approach, and based on the last year of seeing how the company has also responded to the pandemic. I think he's being Sahil's being quite conservative in his presentation, but I mean, these guys have overachieved on every single metric, and I think that that it there is something to be said if you've got a, when the economy is doing well and you do well, then then you're a lot of you could be just in, at the right time and you've got the right wave. But if you're able to really be agile and come to market and do things that are interesting and really perform, then I think that really says something. So to me, it's that agility and having the basic concepts right.
Understood. So you're saying that, you got to feel for the customer, and if you've got that hook, everything else falls in place. And the agility and everything else, and thankfully for Swami, it actually worked well. If I have to bring back Raghav in, right? Raghav, so for you, a customer is like probably a customer ID somewhere embedded on a laptop, right? Sorry, I'm making it very, very, you can say, but it is the reality, right? So without going in front of them, how do you really, I'm bringing the point back. You did answer the question on quality well, on scale also, but probably, I would like to probe a little more on the experience side of things, right? Because the customer, if I have to give you an analogy, right? I mean, the customer also moves, right? The needs, the more you fulfill the needs of a customer, today some of the needs will become spoken and expected. Okay, I want this, give me that, right? Second is, in certain cases the needs are not spoken but they're expected, and the eventual is that they are not spoken and unexpected, right? So this is a whole spectrum, right? So how do you deal with the customer IDs and manage this whole transition well?
Absolutely. Very relevant point that, for us, a lot of our customers, are basically customer IDs. The good thing is for us that, a lot of those customer IDs actually give very specific feedback through whichever platform they're ordering. Unlike a dine-in model where customer could walk in, may have an 80% experience instead of 100%, and, may just walk out without giving any feedback. In all the aggregator apps as well as our own platforms right now, it's very easy for customers after the order to give specific feedback, rate every order, and we can act on it, and that all comes in real time to us. So that's great. In dine-in, as far as I understand, very few single digit percentage of orders actually get feedback from customers. And in delivery models like cloud kitchens, we get feedback from customers, good or bad, in 30-35% of cases. So it gives us a very rich set of data, very meaningful sample for us to act upon. Now, how do we do that? Every time we get a bad rating from a customer, one star or 2-star rating on a scale of 5, our system checks that order from the time it was prepared. Who prepared the order, that is logged in. Did the person who made the order, as per the CCTV, go back to the footage of that time and check, did the person make any mistake? Was the person trained? Was the right person making that order? Then in how much time the order was prepared and how much time the order left from the kitchen. The order might have been prepared well, but it was sitting in the kitchen for 10 minutes and the food might have become cold. So putting the right data points and the structures in place allows us to really do a root cause analysis of every bad rated order. So that is on the part of how do we get the experience right. From all these learnings, we continuously work on get the product right. Then of course, sometimes customers will not tell you, will not rate you, and you would still wonder that why is a particular brand or a product not doing well. And that is where we rely on the traditional methods. Get our customers into a room, do a focus group discussion, go to their home sometimes if they are willing to get you there, and get the entire family to give you feedback. on the product. Those are typically the methods that we deploy. We've also launched our own food trucks with the aim of getting to customers in the societies, and we now have about 20 food trucks across the top 6-7 cities, and they give us a lot of interesting viewpoints from the customers straight away in the societies. We've launched a single serve pizza in Oven Story, which is our pizza brand, which is not a regular round pizza, but it's a semicircular pizza. So we were always thinking that, despite great ratings, how do we make sure that it grows very fast? And I remember an anecdote that a kid on who took a pizza from one of the food trucks, he complained after getting that pizza that he got only half of the pizza, whereas the remaining half of the pizza. So that got us thinking that maybe customers don't understand that, and kids they don't understand this part. So there are different ways to get customer feedback, but thankfully in delivery, a lot of that feedback flows in straight away and very quickly after the order, and it's up to us to do the right analysis and take it forward from there.
Very interesting, Raghav. And we all, I think you've been a consultant yourself before, so everybody has heard the story of whenever I buy a vanilla ice cream, my car won't start. So somebody will completely reject this point, but very interesting. Looking at all the customers from a very personalized lens. It's a long journey from a customer ID to a customer, but thanks for your inputs, Amruta. If I have to just extend the same conversation into a perspective on loyalty, right? I mean, is there really a loyalty here, or it is about and Naveen, I'm coming to you after this. Is it about loyalty when people, or it's about whoever has the highest, we can say the biggest power to acquire customers and the deepest pockets will win eventually. So is there a real loyalty in this space, or probably it is going away?
Well, I think that it's changing. I'll relate to it more from a hospitality perspective. What we found is, and we've done this, we've switched from being point based, which basically ends up being a liability sitting on your books, to an experience based loyalty program. So it's still linked to the number of so the tiers are linked to the number of stays and your spend and the rest of it. But what you're looking at when you are at the site, at the hotel, is an enhancement of your experience. So it could be like a local experience and access to something that you would not be able to organize on your own, that the hotel then has exclusive rights to. It could be an upgrade of the room category, a complimentary meal. It could be something special, but more experience oriented. So I think that's where loyalty seems to be going. So away from sort of the more point based, deal driven. And we're seeing that, we saw that right through the pandemic as well. I've got a small uh, resort that we operate in Himachal, in Palampur. And what we've seen there is that people aren't even looking for deals. They were opting for the premium rooms because those rooms would allow them to then book multiple bedrooms. They were looking for bigger common space. So I think this whole deal hunting scenario has changed completely, and people are looking more for an enhancement of their experiences as opposed to just trying to find a bargain. So I think another point I can relate to in terms of loyalty, that what we've had is a lot of repeat guests that come in and they're choosing to book with us direct. So our brand.com bookings have gone up 50%. So we're still getting a fair contingent that continues to come through a travel agent. But then again, it's a travel agent that they've always used and they trust, and therefore they'll go with their recommendations. So so we're seeing a lot more of this direct one-on-one. The guest wants to call the hotel, speak to the guy who's going to meet with them on arrival, go through the whole itinerary with them, customize their stay in every way possible. So I think loyalty plays a big part in all of that, because basically we've digitized that whole process. So if you're a loyalty member with us, we'd know which side of the bed you sleep on. We know, what you want in terms of a drink first thing in the morning, preferences in terms of activity, so you can pre-book it. So, I think so loyalty's gone beyond just, sort of points and redemption. And I think the digital backend has a big role to play, because then the analytics help you, right? So you're able to then preempt a lot of the requests, and that's what really enhances the stay.
Thanks, Amrita. I think I can relate to it. I mean, a lot of us also now, and when I said loyalty, is it really existing in today's world? It is more about who's trying harder to gain the customer's attention. It's just a matter that whether we have investors like KE Capital sitting behind somebody to keep pumping money, and yourselves, Amrita. So my next question is for Naveen. So, when you invest, Naveen, right? I mean, where would you like your investments to go? Where would you like your investments to be spent out? And Amrita, you can come in whenever you like. And probably there is Sahil. Yeah, Sahil. Once Naveen finishes or Amrita has a perspective, right? I mean, do jump in with your inputs in terms of how you, as somebody who receives money from an investor, right? Where do you want to put in? But let's hear out the investors first.
Yeah, I think building loyalty is tough, right, in the food space. But but a good thing is once you do it, that's when you see exponential growth coming in, right? I think the millennials change in terms of taste, consumer taste, etc. Is far more higher than it was probably 10 years back, right? Which is why it is harder to build loyalty and consistency with some of the newer generation audience. But as I said, a good thing is once you sort of do that, then you can build on it, right? Um, um, I think in general, what we look at when we invest is somebody who can sort of build and get to a right product market fit, especially the stage at which we come in. I think we stress very hard on that, even if it takes multiple iterations for you to get to where you are, to get to a product market fit, even if it takes, you know, 3x more amount of capital, even if it takes 3x more amount of time. I think that's fine, and that's where at least we like most of our monies to be spent on, right? I think once you till you get there, it doesn't make any sense to spend on marketing. But once you get there, then I think essentially to your question, it is just the capital going into marketing, right? Just pumping marketing money into that to just see the company grows, and that's when you hit the inflection point, right? So it's like a typical J curve in any business. Initially, it'll start slow, but once you get to the product market fit, that's when you see the hockey stick curve coming along.
Fantastic. Amrita, any other points here? Where would you like your money to be spent?
I mean, I'll take this question as an operator first. So at least in the restaurant space, we tried multiple things to try and bring in new audiences. And eventually, there are lots of options out there in terms of marketing, but a lot of them are not measurable. So we tried working with bloggers, we tried doing lots of other different things, but really what's worked for us at the end of the day is digital ads and where we can actually see conversion. And at least in the restaurant, what we realized is, for every 10 covers we got booked through our online booking system, we were getting 2 on Instagram. So we tried everything, and then eventually went for those where we could actually measure the returns, because at least then you could see where the conversions were coming in from. As an investor, again, taking the Swami example, I think I've invested in the team and the brand, and so I trust the guys to go out there and leverage their relationships and know which buttons to press. But what I see working well is all the collaborations with like-minded brands, and therefore being able to tap into other audiences who perhaps follow brands that don't know us, Swami, but then will learn of it through the right sort of coffee, or whichever other product is in the same space. And I think that this whole idea of subscription marketing, from whether it's a restaurant space, we've been trying to do that with wine sales also. So I like those kinds of sort of more creative marketing initiatives.
Got it. Sahil, so how would you like to spend money, or how would you? I mean, you've faced it firsthand. I'm sure there are a lot of startups and other people on the call here. So any suggestions, any advice on how do you remain, you can say,
Yeah, okay.
focused, frugal at the same time?
I think the for a brand like ours or a product category like ours, two very important things. One is your product, and the other is your team. Right? Without the product, team can't sell. Without the team, product won't get sold. Right? It's primarily those two things which are very important. Once you have these two going, that's when you start throwing marketing behind it. Whether it's performance marketing, whether it's event marketing, whether it's any sort of marketing, because you're at that stage where you would want somebody to sample you. That's your biggest challenge at the stage that we are at, right? Because I have enough belief in my product that once somebody samples it, they will come back to me, right? They might go and try other brands as well, but I have enough confidence in my product portfolio that you will stick with me. And we have also built the mix in such a manner, right? For example, we never planned to do a soda, but we know that a soda helps us close a five-star hotel account, right? So soda is my leverage to get into a five-star hotel, sort of to close an account of that sort. We were the first in the market, so to say, to introduce flavored tonics. People were traveling abroad, people were having flavored tonics, but nothing was available in India. So when we started off with our base tonic, but we realized that yes, there is a demand for flavored tonic, there is a demand for a low-calorie version of tonic waters, and that's where we went with the whole thing. In our last fundraise, for example, MA was a part of that fundraise. The question that was asked very pertinently was, what is your product roadmap, right? What are the new products that you're going to launch, and where is the money going? So the money is going towards the product launch, and it's going towards the team. Marketing and everything is also a part of it, but majority of it, but the first aspect of spending the money is to bolster your product portfolio and build your team, because we also had plans to go to other markets and smaller tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities with the new non-alcoholic product range that we were launching. So I think Amruta has pretty much summed it up in a very concise manner of what it is all about. So I think it's product, team, and marketing, those three things. In what order, that depends specifically on what stage you are at, and what are your projections in terms of your numbers looking like and stuff like that.
Interesting. Product, team, and marketing. Maybe Raghav will add technology to that for sure. The way the live, I know we are at the top of the hour, but I think, I don't know, the traditional restaurateurs, Horeca folks will remember the metric called RevPASH, the revenue per available seat hour, table turns. To the new world of, we are talking about, number of bills, average bill value, etc. Time spent online. It's a pretty interesting journey, right? I mean, but as I think one of our panelists said, that India is at a nascent stage. We have a room to grow, and that growth will come from people. Whatever I've understood thus far is people who have the right hooks and are solving the right customer problems, right? And obviously, getting the investors the returns. At the end of the day, without the returns, there won't be investors. And without a good innovative product like yours, there won't be anything. So thank you so much, Shivangi. I'll hand it back to you. I can see there are lots and lots of questions coming in, but I think it was a roller coaster ride, right from virtual drinking guide to house parties to food trucks. I don't know, probably now it'll be drones flying all over the city.
I think that's an interesting thought, Rajat. And on that note, I think I'm going to pick up a futuristic question to start with to continue the thought process. So, what are the kind of models that we're seeing actually emerging going forward for the sector as a whole? Since the pre-COVID model might not really be relevant, and it also revolved a lot around the whole hospitality experience, which I think even Rahul pointed out in the earlier keynote that you may not be able to directly translate. So I would actually, maybe if some of you can shed some light on new models. I think the drones could be one of those, but any other things that we're seeing?
So I think usual suspect would be Raghav here to start with.
Right. So I think the industry has definitely seen delivery gaining a lot of share, but I think for some of the established QSRs, like for example, I know from the Domino's reports that takeaway as a model increased a lot in terms of its share in the overall business pie. A lot of people who still wanted food from certain restaurants would be willing to go and pick it up from there. um, those are typically the ones which are on the demand side. On the supply side, I think the new models that one of the models that we are experimenting with is that in our kitchens we are ourselves investing in brands, early stage brands which have produced a product market fit at a smaller level. For example, we have a brand in our portfolio called Slay Coffee, which did it at a small scale in Bangalore as a very strong coffee brand. And then we invested in Slay and took it all over the country into our kitchens. So and that's part of our Rebel Launcher program. So we are always looking out for product market fit cases like those, and that is where I think cloud kitchens have a potential to actually become platforms where they don't need to do all the brands themselves, because getting the product market fit right takes a lot of time, and somebody out there might be doing it in a specific cuisine at a specific price point, and it's about finding those cases and taking them all over along with you. And so I really feel that our Rebel Launcher program is going to be very interesting for us. Naturals ice cream, Mad Over Donuts, we are taking them all over the country through our kitchen network. And this could be a way for restaurant brands to scale up much faster across the country.
Thanks, Raghav. I think, Rajat has another interesting question, which kind of takes on the discussion that we've been having over the last hour or so, where, this is interesting that, people get bored of the same menus in like fine dine restaurants. But if you compare it to a chain, say a McDonald's or a Domino's Pizza, there's not really that fatigue that sets in. So how can we really change the behavior of the Indian consumer? Or is it really correct of brands to say that they actually have a handle on consumer behavior, because we're really seeing two different trends here? So what really motivates and drives these trends?
Yeah, I think guys, feel free to jump in. Maybe Amruta, would you like to take that one, followed by maybe Sahil?
So one of the things that I haven't tried myself, but I've been tempted to look at, is to create. So like I mentioned earlier, the restaurant we have trades at a 40 euro APC, and then all the other Indian players are about 10 euros above. So what we've been trying to look at is seeing if we can leverage our existing kitchens, but maybe come up with a brand that sits in between. So it's the same kitchen, but it's a different brand that then caters at a different price point. So you're using the same, sort of setup, but you're not really diluting the, the main brand, which has a premium offering. So it's something that I've been toying with as an idea. I haven't tested it yet, but I'm tempted to. So that would be my way of, being able to keep my exclusivity for the restaurant brand, but also then cater to a more, sort of fluid seasonal. So.
Sure. Would you like to add anything, Sahil, from the other side?
From this perspective, I think what we do is we typically try and do a lot of collaborations. With the kind of times we've had in the last year or so, keep launching new products which will probably be a hit or miss. You'd rather ride on a collaboration and launch something that the other brand or other collaborator also pushes for you. So you're talking to a larger audience than you would typically do for. So we team up our tonic waters with coffee a lot, right? So we've done a couple of gift boxes with dope coffee, or we are available at like a Blue Tokai. So Blue Tokai serves a cold brew and a tonic water. so we basically try and work out on those kind of things where I will get the visibility for my product in an unexpected sort of a location, right? Whether it also be a collaboration or saying I will go to an alcohol brand and do a bundle offer with them, right? So what you're getting in when you buy a bottle of alcohol, you're getting a mixers right then and there with it. So I think that's where we kind of, or how we do it, because I don't think it's from a brand like ours and how we do our products. I don't think it's very easy to keep launching new things and then discontinuing them and then figuring out what to do next. So we have a roadmap which we like to follow, but we chip in with these little collaborations or a collaborative beverage or a collaborative experience or a bundle or those kind of things.
Thank you, Sahil. I think we are running out of time, but I'll take one last question this is from an investor's perspective. So I think what would be interesting for the investors in the audience to understand is that given the shock of the pandemic, I think a lot of questions are revolving around valuations. What are the KPIs that investors should look for? I think maybe this is a question that the panel can share their views on. And maybe we can conclude with this, since I have to bring in the investments here. I cannot escape that at MA.
I think Naveen did a fantastic job, and so did Amrita on providing some insights, right? On the unit economics, leg room, where would they want their investments to go, etc. Maybe, Naveen, would you like to come in one more time and just set it up again, if that's okay?
Yeah, I think fairly similar to what I said. I think KPIs for this business again would be similar to any e-commerce business as well. So I think key would be I think most important would be the product market fit. Whatever metrics come with product market fit. Let's say retention, cohort, repeat, conversion, etc. On the quantitative metrics, it would be just growth, right? I mean, in the early days, you need to see growth of 25, 30% month on month. While the unit economics can be weak initially, but an investor needs to see a path that with scale and some of the fulfillment costs coming down, etc., does this transition into a fairly profitable business going forward, right? And is the model geared up for that, even if you would be sort of bleeding early on? So I think these two things. I think after pandemic, I think unit economics is definitely going to be the focus. I think gone are the days where people will be still content, or investors in this space, and after a lot of money gone in the last 5 years, sort of saturation happening. Investors will still be okay with negative unit economics to start with, right? I think definitely the days on focus on EBITDA profitability will be back. So my advice to any startup would be, just focus on some of these very, very closely as you build the business out.
Yeah, Amrita, any final words on it?
No, so I agree with the fact that I think things have changed and people won't, we'll be looking at a new set of benchmarks. I think we'll have to look at more closely in terms of how good the management teams are in terms of forecasting in a difficult scenario, and to their performance on maybe on a closer on a quarter to quarter basis, since it's such a moving piece. So I think that these sort of long-term sort of views where there's so much uncertainty, I think it'll come down to gauging how good the teams are at being able to to cater to shorter term scenarios.
If I can add one point here, Shivangi, if you will allow, I think in the long term, what we see, right? I mean, whoever owns the customer, or whoever knows the customer or is linked to the customer, and on the other side, whoever is got the product, right? And in certain cases, inventory as such, right? And when I say inventory, it could be rooms or anything else in hospitality. So whoever owns these two aspects, right? In the long run, they will emerge, because they will try to feed off each other, okay, over a period of time, but eventually things will start consolidating. So find your space, don't try to do too much, okay? Because sometimes people try to be phenomenal, innovative products at the same time, trying to be significantly superior on the technology side to acquire customers. Rebel Food is trying to do probably, ahead of the curve compared to others, but it's not easy, right? I mean, you need to balance out both these worlds. And the third important part is that the link between these two are, the enablers, which is connecting product to the customer, right? Or all the delivery aspects, etc. And trust me, there are huge amount of investments which are being planned not only by core delivery platforms, but the supporting platforms, like for example, e-bikes, right? There is a huge electronic wave that is going to come, electrical wave, in terms of e-bikes, e-motorcycles, etc. So this industry is poised for a significant growth, and you can see the trend by those investments. Like we say, right, the best way to track the GDP or the economy is to see whether the commercial vehicles are selling or not, because it means goods are moving from one place to another. So yeah, good times ahead. Back to you, Shivangi.
Thank you, Rajat. I think on that positive note, I will draw the evening to a close. Big thank you to all our panelists and to Rahul for taking time out to be with us today. And also, we thank our associate partner, Eagle Owl, for supporting this event. On behalf of the entire Mumbai Angels team, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and being part of this event. You've been a wonderful audience, and we hope to see you again at some of our future events. So just quickly, we have something coming up on the 3rd of March, which is a masterclass titled Seed to Series, where we discuss the readiness for a fundraise conducted by KNAV. We also have a session later on cybersecurity, which will be conducted by Ajay Singh, a corporate advisor and author of CyberStrong. Primer, later on in the month of April, we have sessions on negotiating the Series A round for angels and founders, and also followed by a session on FDI, navigating the legal framework, conducted by Akshi Singhal. So you can keep track of all our events through our website, social media, whose links have been shared with you on the chat window. We're sure that your participation in Flavors is only the beginning of a long-lasting association with Mumbai Angels Network. See you soon. Good night, and thank you. You've been a great audience, and have a wonderful evening ahead.
Thanks,
you.
Shivangi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rajat.
Thank you.
Bye. Well done. Bye. Bye.